Hey, the craziest thing that's ever happened to my agency is back in March of this year, 2024, I sold 51% of our combined organizations for an evaluation of $70 million. I'm Justin Brock. I run Bobby Brock Insurance and Go Guru, and I'm an insurance dude. Look, I got my hat backwards. I'm a dude.
Boom! Boom!
Boom! I didn't even have my hat on backwards.
There you go. We're both dudes.
Yeah.
Where's my hat? It's been a while, Justin.
Yeah, it has been. It's probably been a couple of years.
Yeah, you were growing like a weed back then, and you never stopped.
No, man. Never stop, never stopping. I think I heard that in a movie or something. The Social Network, the twins that are trying to sue Mark Zuckerberg.
Yeah.
They go to the Harvard president, and he says, Harvard graduates today would rather invent a job than learn to take one.
And Mark Zuckerberg stole that idea.
I understand. And I'm asking what you want me to do about it.
I want to work at a tech company, or I want to be a tech guy, or I want to create a tech solution. Now it's the influencer, like you said, it's the Mr. Beast, it's the Kardashian, the whatever, and all the mini ones in between that. I mean, my kids don't watch Nickelodeon or Disney anymore. They watch some YouTuber that they watch, you know.
Yeah, same
So
here.
wild.
It's a completely different world.
When I started in the insurance agency, like I felt really different than the older agents, and older agent type agencies were not appealing to me whatsoever. And a lot of older agents would talk about like the younger generation and, oh, the younger generation doesn't, blah, blah, blah. They would complain a lot. I kept searching, like, what is the difference? How do we create this culture? You know, younger people are talking more about culture in a business rather than paycheck. And then, you know, coming across Maslow's hierarchy of need and just going from like the lowest form of like just trying to survive all the way to self-actualization. I think what happened was you have, you know, Craig's generation that came out of like the World War II era.
No, it's World War I.
War of 1812.
That was my first war.
My grandma lived during the Depression where she raised her brothers and sisters and didn't eat so that they could have food. And my grandma growing up hoarded money. There was no self-actualization. There was no like trying to fulfill some sort of purpose.
Yeah.
So that era was that, right? Get paid a lot of money, I'll work my ass off for it.
Save, 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 save.
Next generation, my mom's generation, they're not wanting to go to war. They don't want to do it like they used to do it. They're starting to get more into that self-actualization, right? Because they didn't have to experience the same hardship as like my grandma.
Every generation had some crazy shit going on. I mean,
Everything's always crazy.
Cold War period where they were like doing drills telling them like, oh, they're going to nuke us. So if you get under your desk.
Dude, we had to get under the desk.
I mean, there might be like loopholes in there where it's less bad than other times. In some ways, we're in one of those.
I agree.
But it's funny because those people are watching that and they're like, man, no wonder I'm screwed up. I had to live through all this. And I'm like,
right.
No, everybody has their shit. I don't think it's just young people. I think the same thing with like the boomer generation might say, oh, these kids these days don't do this. And I'm like, wait a minute. Weren't boomers the ones at Woodstock having orgies and doing acid in 1969 in the field? Like, but I'm like, as a generation, they had the same issues that any other generation has, you know.
Right.
You know, my mom was Gen X, my dad was a boomer. You know, she would have been like on the older side of Gen X, he'd have been on the younger side of the boomer. Both of them, to me, have their issues. The way I view Gen X because of my mom and like my relatives that are in that age group is they were the ones raising me like hotbox and Marlboros in the Mercury Cougar with their kids.
Right.
Different, you know? So there's like, every generation has like pros and cons, but like, I don't think one's worse than the other. And if you just understand that, like you said, self-actualization, young people these days, because of the exposure to what is possible, maybe they have a higher expectation of quality of life early on. Now, at some point, some of them are just going to have to get to work because they didn't figure shit out, you know, and you got to pay your bills. And when you start popping out kids, somebody's got to take care of them. You got to take care of your stuff. But in that period of time, I would say like that 20s era, that decade, 18 to 30, 18 to 32, somewhere in there, I think they're playing the field a little bit because they're like, I want to find something that I can get behind. And it's not all about money.
Yeah.
I need more than X, but I also want to do it in a place where I don't want to kill myself every day. So
the older generation, it was money. They're thinking like, oh, I got to pay more. They're not coming in and they're not doing all this stuff. It's like they want to be a part of something bigger. And you've created a business that is this small. You're not trying to do anything bigger.
No.
Like to your point, with your agency, you are creating something bigger. You're creating a movement. And that's something that younger people can get behind.
John Lee DeMoss's EO Fire podcast the other day, and he was asking me for a title, and the title I used was "People Want to Work, They Just Don't Want to Work for You." That's the same concept we're talking about. It's like you know, when you're team building, give them something to aspire to. You first of all, you need to be a vibrant, leader. It doesn't mean you have to be Napoleon, but like you have to be someone that it's like, hey, I can get behind this guy. And that doesn't mean they want to emulate you in every way, but there has to be something about you, as a leader. And then as you grow, the leaders that you put in between, these have to be people that people can respect. There are traits that they want to emulate, especially young people. They're looking for mentorship in some way. Now, it's not always money. It's not always business building. Sometimes it's just mentorship in how to be happy and how to be a better dad and how to be a better husband or wife or, all that kind of stuff. And I'm enthusiastic that I think a lot of businesses are figuring this out and that it's going to be part of a good culture shift. You do have to pay people enough, you can't gyp people. Like, it is expensive to live these days, it is. I mean, inflation's a hell of a drug, but like so it is expensive, but like it doesn't mean people have to get rich, they just have to make enough money to be comfortable so that they can focus on the mission, and then they have to also buy into that mission. And then you end up getting I have employees that, that are really bought in, that are like, it's like having 3 people work for me, because they do so much. And it's not because I'm begging them to do that much. It's just because some people just inherently do that, and you find your winners. One thing I struggle with that's a popular talking point is like Gary Vee's one that says hire fast, fire faster, promote fastest. I struggle with the firing part. I mean, we fire people.
Yeah. Well, he even says he has struggles with that.
You got to have a problem if you don't struggle with it, right?
Yeah.
I mean, let's put it out. Let's be real, right? Like, I mean, it's a person, and I feel shitty even when they're shitty. I still feel shitty.
I know.
It's like maybe I did something wrong.
Like, I have this factor with me, is like, if I feel like they're trying, I'll hold on to them for a long time. Like, if I feel like they're trying, even if I feel like their skill level or capability is far off, they're trying. If they're not trying, I still hold on to them longer than I should. but the ones that are not trying are the easier ones to let go, because I feel like, look, you're not in it. But I hate that when I have somebody that's like, oh, you're there, you just need to quit making stupid decisions. I hold on to that, way longer. But I also think there is a positive aspect in the culture when people believe that it's a double-edged sword, because you have to make sure that the stragglers aren't strung along to the point where other people think they can do less and still be strung along. But then you also don't want to make people think that any tiny little mistake is going to be the end of their career, So it's like this balancing act between there. And I think that's probably, at this point for me, that's the harder part, is just when do you cut ties versus how long do you to work on someone.
I think one of the litmus tests for me is that old saying by Dr. Spock, which is the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. So I always get that feeling of shit, yeah, you're right. Like that bad person will infect the rest. If they're complaining and they're not they don't like to show up to work anymore. It's like, I got to think the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. And I'm one of the few too, I got to get rid of them. But it's hard to do.
The ship analogy, we use that a lot, where you have anchors, passengers, and rowers. Passengers are just pulling their own weight. Rowers are actually propelling the entire ship forward. We are a ship, and then anchors are holding us back. The anchors are the ones that got to cut away. The passengers, of course, they can be harder to identify. Sometimes an anchor is hard to identify, man. Sometimes an anchor is a weird thing, because it'll be somebody that is motivated and is a top producer, but they're trying to steer the ship into the direction that benefits them disproportionately, especially on a sales team, man. That's a big deal on a sales team. They'll try to use and harness the data to benefit themselves more than the business, and that you can't have that. So you have to try to safeguard that, or eventually cut ties with the people that do it. But the other one is, like you just said, I tell them openly, look, I love everybody that's in here, but my goal is to make sure that the business prospers so that all of us can continue to prosper because it feeds all of us. So I'm going to have to use the Spock one now. The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few, because in here, that's true. You know, you get into politics, you get the altruistic people versus the super conservative people. There might be a battle, but in here, in this dictatorship, my business, the many outweigh the needs of the few. That's the way it's got to run.
Look at the business, and I've used this analogy too, is that it's a baby and you got to feed the baby. You got to nurture it. You got to take care of it because it's got to grow. Because if it doesn't, and you don't feed the baby dies. It just dies. People don't understand that, business is either going up or it's going down. It's never going linear.